If you're looking for an easy way to create twists on your retellings, one thing that you can do is take the story that everybody knows, but drop it into a different setting. And that can be, a dystopian world in the future. That could be a fantasy realm. That could be just a weird random location that exists in real life, or some kind of twist that takes them out of where they are into something else. And that other place that you're dropping them into will very strongly inform what happens inside of the story, which is exactly what I did in Blood is Silent. This is my Little Red Riding Hood retelling, and I took Little Red Riding Hood and dropped her into a circus. She is a circus aerialist. Her grandmother is in charge of the talent. She works with a lot of other people who do a lot of different circus acts, and then that is going to facilitate the conversation we're having inside of the story. Now, what happens when you change the location? Using this story specifically, it is going to inform what happens. Because in the original story, Little Red Riding Hood is a girl who goes into the woods with a basket of food for her frail, sick grandma on the other side of the forest. And of course, she runs into the wolf and mayhem ensues. In my story, she is in the circus. We enter the conversation with her performing. She's going to be up on her aerialist silks doing all of the things. And when she comes back down, she realizes her grandmother is no longer there. She has gone off to find new talent or to scout things or to source things, and she's not back. And she's not back in a timely fashion. Grandma is known for kind of going off and doing her own thing because she's kind of in charge of all the acts. The owner of the circus just gives her a lot of leeway for these things, but she is sent to find her grandmother because things have happened, and now she's not back and we're worried about her. And so dropping it into a circus changes everything. It changes the motivation for the clothing that she wears. So inside of the circus, to easily identify the different performers, the grandma, who is in charge of the talent, gives them each a different color. So each performance has a different color ascribed to it, and that is their signature color. So for our aerialist, she is in red. She's in this bold red outfit. This is kind of how she does her thing. And then that can also lead into the cape and the hood and all of the things that she's going to need going into the woods to then find her grandmother. But all of it is those signature colors. Everybody's kind of like, this is the red family, this is the blue family, these are the purple things that we do. And everybody has a color that looks really good with them, but also helps their performance to stand out and makes them easily identifiable when everybody's in the ring, everything's happening, and to transition from one act to the next. So having the circus gives me a lot of freedom with the costumes, but also gives a motivation for the coloring. Then because we have a circus, now we have a whole bunch of people that can be involved in the story because there are different acts and different people. There are different people doing different things with different motivations, and that really lends itself to a lot of the characters inside of the story. Because think about it, it's not just Red Riding Hood, it's Red and her grandma and the wolf, and we've got a huntsman or a woodsman or whatever we're calling it. There are other people in the original that can kind of tie back to some of these different things, be it in their circus or the rival circus or the people in the town. There's a lot that we can then connect and draw those lines to those traditional touchstones. And so with the circus, now we have the ability to have really smart, really flexible people, like physically flexible, but also emotionally and mentally flexible. So they can kind of jump through a lot of hoops, literally and metaphorically. We have, different apparatuses that we can be using inside of this story. I will kind of say one of the potential aerialist apparatuses that they could be using does strongly come into play in this story related to the wolf. And there's just a lot that you can do with what a circus is, with the tent, with the apparatuses, with the different animals, with all of the things, like the horses come strongly into play. There's a lot of stuff that's really important in the circus that now motivates and informs what's happening to our Red Riding Hood, to our grandmother, to our wolf, and to the other people who are involved. So we get a lot visually, but we also get a lot that we can work with inside of the storyline. So you can take your story, whatever story that is, and drop them into a different location. For example, my Sleeping Beauty retelling is a girl dropped into a virtual reality video game in a dystopian future. So she's in a dystopian future. She is inside of a virtual reality video game where you're kind of strapped down in a chair and you kind of go under to go into this game. And so we get the dystopian, but we also get the fantasy realm with the digital dragons and all of these things. And that strongly informed why Sleeping Beauty is asleep, why she can interact while she's asleep, and what happens if she doesn't wake up in the real world. There's a lot that I can do with that simply by dropping her in a different setting. You can take any of your stories and drop them in a different setting. I dropped Cinderella into a dystopian future, and that turned her into an assassin or an assistant to a master assassin, I suppose I should say. You can take your characters and drop them into futuristic things, into past historical things, into things that don't exist because they're in some kind of fantasy realm. You can even drop them into a contemporary setting. What would happen if you took a modern day Cinderella into a high school or into a college or into the workforce? What would you do if you dropped something like Snow White into a modern setting, or a dystopian setting, or a historical setting, or a fantasy realm? What could you do with these things? Changing the setting makes all the difference. So think about what you want to retell, and now where can you change that setting? What can you drop them into? And how does that change the story, the motivation for the characters, and how can you tie in all those touchstones? Drop your questions on Blood is Silent down below. I want to hear about you and what questions you have for this story. I also want to hear about some of the ideas you have for working on retellings, what other settings you could drop characters into, so we can build up a conversation in the comment section down below. We'll see you in our daily videos helping you navigate the world of your reading, but also your writing, your publishing, and your marketing to make this your most profitable year ever with the least amount of stress, overwhelm, and time commitment as you're creating that content. We'll see you then.